Welcome to The Confessional, the new show from Are You Not Entertained, brought to you by PEDL Labs, who are rewriting the playbook for fan engagement, most recently with the groundbreaking Connected British and Irish Lions jersey in collaboration with Connected Fanatics, proof that the future of sport is already here. In this series, Roger Mitchell is joined by a series of remarkable guests for conversations that tackle the questions most people avoid. Raw, revealing, and never predictable. If you want the kind of insight and honesty you simply won't find anywhere else, then join Roger for questions and answers that rarely see the light of day.
I'm Roger Mitchell, and this is that very special podcast called The Confessional. Today we're very lucky because we've got somebody that has got a credible claim to be the most decorated storyteller in sport, Caroline Rowland. She's also the perfect guest in terms of timing because we're right in the middle of the Olympics and AI content creation is flavour of the month in the chattering classes. Caroline is in the Olympics Hall of Fame for filmmaking. She's an Emmy nominee, winner of a Moondance Best International Documentary Award, the creative director of 10 successful sports and cultural bids, founder of that famous creative agency New Moon, which is back again, the architect of the Once Upon a Time storytelling process, and she's been credited with inventing the bid film format that we saw starting probably in the London Olympics, and which has now informed all the documentaries behind the scenes, the stories behind the pitch, etc., etc. And now she's reinventing archive with a company called Egoli, which we may touch on. Caroline Rowland, welcome to The Confessional.
Hi, Roger. Very nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
No, wonderful, wonderful. So you know the format about this. Everybody's got the same 6 questions, which we ask you to answer. And if I'm doing a decent job, we'll bounce around your answers to see a little bit more about what your sins and your vices really are. But we'll get on to that a little bit later. I'm thinking particularly about the celebrity house that you flooded in California. I didn't
flood it. That had nothing to do with me.
That's your story, Caroline. We'll get on to that in a minute. Here we go. And then, in fact, this is the first question. For what and to whom do you need to ask forgiveness?
You've actually just opened that Pandora's box far wider than I'd intended. There are hundreds of people I probably need to ask forgiveness. But I think, when I was reflecting on this question, in all humility, I think to be fairly specific and narrow in my response to this question, my ex-husband and my ex-colleagues at New Moon, who I think, in the 21 years of New Moon's existence, were the people who I look back now and I drove so hard to try to achieve things that so many thought were impossible. I hope that they had some fun along the way, but I do sometimes think that maybe my sort of aspirations and demands were unreasonable.
So do you consider yourself quite a demanding person, Caroline?
Oh, I'm total A-type.
Yeah.
I think I'm very, very demanding of myself and of others. And I have this sort of relentless desire and passion and energy to invent things and create new things and solve problems with innovative, creative solutions. And as I get older, I think actually I need to ask forgiveness of myself. You realize how exhausting it is to constantly be pursuing that kind of perfectionism. I've never been a high level athlete, but I can only think that that's what someone standing at the start of an Olympic race feels. So
you would be somebody that would, as the founder of New Moon, you would be coming into your team. And was your ex-husband part of that team? He was in New Moon, was he?
Yes, he was. Yeah, in the last few years of New Moon, he came on board and basically he was our CFO and completely revived and reshaped the whole financial operation.
So you come in and like everybody, you're a micromanager. Would that be fair? What's happened? No,
I don't think I'm a micromanager. I just have such ridiculously high standards. So, I mean, gosh, that makes me sound like an ogre. I don't think I am. But I will never forget the day where we were shortlisted to work with London 2012 on the bid for the London Games. And in those days, of course, your briefs came through on a fax machine. And I picked this thing off the fax machine and I walked into the production office, very Chamberlain-like, I think, waving this piece of paper around, saying, if it's the last thing we do, we're going to win this pitch. And honestly, I think there was an audible groan because that was it. It meant that, everybody's evenings, weekends, waking moments were going to be preoccupied with creating something exceptional. I've mellowed.
But let me ask you, now that you obviously aren't, because I know you, but I do know you well enough to recognise the juxtaposition with the way you come across aesthetically, and that's a compliment, and the kind of game face that you have when you're on, if you know what I mean. Like the steely blue eyes. Do you think that's intimidated people? Do you think it's intimidated men specifically?
Oh my goodness me. No, I don't think I'm terribly intimidating.
Why do you need to ask forgiveness then if you've not been intimidating? These people must have been terrified, and it.
Oh no, they weren't terrified. I hope not. I really hope not. I just think I have very high standards of people and demand, and of myself. I think and that's quite an important thing that I realize as I get older. To ask forgiveness of oneself is often one of the most difficult and one of the most important things we can do. So I hope I haven't terrified anybody, but certainly I'd like to think, I hope, that somehow some of this drive has raised people's games, has given them and me the opportunity to do things and experience things we wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to experience.
I'm sure that's the case. I'm absolutely sure that's the case. You don't make an omelette without breaking some eggs. And,
no.
I've always admired that in you. And one of the things I want to ask about relatively seriously in this part of the show. We once had a conversation about you being in the world of venture capital in a startup and looking to raise money. You felt that some people didn't behave properly, and most of them would have been men. Explain that a little bit, because I can believe that 100%, and it's a little bit linked to what I said to you before. Do you think it's harder for women, and that's why sometimes you have to really, show your authority? Is that part of it?
I think the short answer to that question is yes. I don't think there's any question that it is harder. And I would not have agreed with that several years ago. Before personally finding myself in a space where I, wanted to raise money to power a business, I would probably have rolled my eyes and said, oh, well, that's just women who haven't got their act together. I like to think I have got my act together, and I can honestly tell you I have been intimidated and undermined and dismissed by many male VCs. I have to say I've only ever pitched to 2 female VCs, but everyone else is male. And I definitely have encountered all the stuff you read about, and all the stuff that the evidence of, fewer than 22% of venture capital money goes to female founders. I can see why. It's incredibly hard. The dice are weighted against you.
But I do believe you on this. The stats are the stats. But what is it they're doing? Is it like condescending, or is it just over nasty, or have they got a higher bar for you, or is it all of the above?
I think depending on who it is, it can be any or all of those. I actually had one experience during a fairly intense round of fundraising that we were doing a few years ago, which actually was the trigger that provoked me to stop fundraising and start focusing on the business. I was actually on that call with one of our shareholders. The call was recorded, And the shareholder suggested to me afterwards that I should, forgive my language, sue the arse off this venture capitalist who had been, quite honestly, brazenly abusive. I mean, it was the most extraordinary experience to, all I was doing was pitching a business, suggesting that there was an opportunity for the venture capitalist. I mean, I wouldn't pitch something if I didn't think there was something in it for them. And honestly, it felt like I had been sent to the headmaster's office and I was being caned. It was the most humiliating and honestly quite terrifying experience. I had never in my life experienced someone behaving in that way. And I mean, of course, I didn't sue him and just never was in contact with him again, and never will be. So it's I can't believe that happens to men. Maybe it does, and maybe I'm only representing one half of the story. But there are situations that you talk with other female founders about that none of us can believe actually transfer across gender.
That is very hard and very hard to listen to and not be sad about, because if somebody with your track record of creating value through businesses that you've founded and grown isn't getting a fair chance, then I don't know who is. But listen, I want to link that to another question about forgiveness, and this is because I know you, and hopefully people are also starting to get an idea about your high standards for delivery. Everybody that's been involved in VC for the last 7 years, i.e. they've gone through the end of the good, really easy times and then, more difficult times in the last 3 or 4 years, we all have had moments where the business plan hasn't been achieved. The idea of what was in the deck and in the numbers hasn't been delivered, and you have to go back for more money. See, when you do that, do you feel guilty? Do you feel an overly sense of... Because somebody else that I was having this conversation with, and I had to say to them, you owe these people nothing. It's a high-risk investment, VC, for high return. If it doesn't work out, they were big boys and big girls investing in it. But I tend to think your personality probably is such that it weighs on you more than I would be advising you to let it weigh on you, if that makes sense.
I think you know me better than I'm perhaps prepared to admit. It does weigh on me. And it probably is linked very much to this personality trait that I'm really trying to keep a lid on, which is this, always having to make damn sure that everything is perfect. I feel an enormous sense of responsibility to our shareholders. I have on multiple occasions in Egoli's short history personally underwritten, supported, written checks for things that needed to be done rather than going back to investors. They always say when you're making a film, never make it with your own money. I mean, probably the same is true for businesses, but I've rejected that mantra both in films and in business. And I will not stop until every single last shareholder is made whole. And it may not happen on the timeline that they like. It may not happen in the way that they like. They may ultimately not make the return that they like, although I hope they do, because then I will too. But I'm relentlessly in support of making sure that anyone that has taken a risk has not or will not be let down. So yes, that does weigh heavy.
Well, you should go a little bit easier on that. High risk and high reward are two sides of the same coin, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, and it's part of the game. So I think I've said this to you before. It's the way it is,
It is.
But the fact is that you have gone through a couple of difficult moments, and we'll get on to it, I'm sure, in a minute. But it's all going really well now, both at Egoli and New Moon, and that's credit to you. Before we leave this first question, let's get back to you flooding that flat. What actually is the story there, Caroline?
Oh, but it wasn't actually flooding it. And in fact, it had absolutely nothing to do with me. But while I was living in Los Angeles, I lived in Los Angeles for 9 years and commuted between London and LA. And through a bizarre set of circumstances, and I won't mention his name, but I ended up renting a house from a very serious A-list Hollywood celebrity and his wife. And it's the most beautiful house. It really is lovely. It's an early 1920s Spanish house right on the beach between Santa Monica and Malibu, just at the base of the Palisades. It had a pool, or it has a pool, and an outhouse, and all. I mean, I lived the absolute Hollywood life. It was crazy. And I was there as a sort of caretaker tenant. I could never have afforded to live in the house if I was paying a commercial rent. I have, by the way, heard what they are getting in rent now, and it just makes your eyes water. But no, I basically came back from having been in the UK at one point, and everything in the walk-in wardrobe, and there was a fairly expansive walk-in wardrobe, was soaking wet. And there was no evidence of any water. And then I could see in the bedroom that or could feel underfoot that the floor was damp. Anyway, a very long story short, I had done absolutely nothing, but they had a very serious case of mold, which had been provoked by a seal on a window that had not been properly done when they'd renovated the house. And essentially the whole place, I mean, all of my clothes needed to be completely cleaned and restored and everything else. Furniture needed to be repaired. And anyway, the long and the short of it was that coincided with me thinking about coming back to the UK. So rather than live through the agony, I scarpered, ended the lease and came back to the UK.
But the funny bit about when you tell that story is how horrified they were that you may have been somebody that felt they were aggrieved and could do something about it.
No, they were convinced I was going to sue them. And I couldn't get that through my head. I was kind of, this is what happens. It rained. It rained heavily while I was away. There was a seal on a window. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. The water came in. Some mold occurred. This is all stuff that just happens. But they were absolutely terrified that I was going to sue. To me, that is something I just don't get. That the kind of, the very litigious American way of life, I just don't get it. The world is the world.
The world is the world. Let's move on to the second question. What's the deal you wish you hadn't done?
Do you know, I've really pondered this. I don't think there's, and hindsight is a wonderful thing. With hindsight, I don't think there is a deal that I wouldn't have done, because every single one of them, I and the teams that I've worked with have learnt something, and have also, I think, been able to contribute value, even where it's been incredibly, incredibly difficult. And those things are pretty special in hindsight. They're horrible at the time. I mean, when you're living through any situation like that, it really is pretty horrific. But retrospectively, I think every single deal I've ever done has in some way had a positive outcome. So I don't know that there is one that I wouldn't have done.
Okay, that's the kind of like the if you get lemons, make lemonade mindset, which everybody says you have to do. You have to, turn a problem into an opportunity. But, putting yourself back in that moment in time, wherever it was, knowing that you will learn something out of it, but you went through a lot of pain, what is the one that you say, no, I prefer I had not done that?
Well, in fact, the sort of the world, circumstance and fate intervened. The one deal that I didn't do, that I am so glad didn't happen, was, and you will remember this, I remember talking with you about it at the time, was listing Egoli very early on in our journey. We were pounced on by a kind of investment group who wanted to roll us up with 4 or 5 other companies and wanted to list this new business. And basically that all happened just at the time of the Ukraine war breaking out, or the Russian war with Ukraine breaking out. And a lot of the money in the fund was Russian money. And the whole thing fell apart. I have to say, I'm pretty sure that if we had done that deal, and if circumstance and fate had not intervened, that would be the deal I would have regretted forever. And that was, they're waving or dangling the carrot of a valuation of $100 million. I mean, it's very, very seductive. But
it is. It is. And then, of course, Caroline, you alluded to it there, over your journey with Egoli. I was certainly over these last 5 years, maybe more than that. You've come up against the world of investment and the capital markets, probably a world you didn't have a lot of a connection with before. And I think your experience is one that everybody should listen to. And I still tell people about it every day. I think people give the finance industry too much credit. They think that I do. I think there's a view that we are the smartest guys in the room and we're 2 or 3 steps ahead, and we know something that you don't, and we're going to take advantage of you. Whereas the truth is, the capital markets in some ways are moody like a Spanish woman. They're moody like a Spanish woman, if that's not sexist. Spanish man, Spanish woman, in the sense that some days it's go, 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 and some days it's we're all going to die. When it's go, 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 you play that. You don't really think too much about is the valuation justified or not. Who is it that said, Chuck Prince, if the music's playing, you get on the dance floor. And I think that moment that you're talking about, okay, Russian money, not Russian money, but that was the moment of SPACs as well. People may be listening. Like anything goes when you can get a SPAC away, which is basically listing an empty box on the promise that you will buy a decent business in the future. That is. So people, and I say this because it's so important for everything that's around sport and sport tech now, and finance people are not as smart as you think they are. They're as opportunistic as the guy selling tomatoes in the barrel in the marketplace. And I just think you got an experience of that, because you're not like that at all, and you're straight down the middle. It was quite shocking for you.
Yes, I still have the scars. I'll have them forever. But I think if I ran a very lovely creative agency production company where things were very simple and straightforward. We made a lot of money. We did very well. We packaged product that we then distributed. Packaging films and that kind of financing felt very difficult. But actually, in retrospect, there is a well-trodden path and a good structure for doing it. And there are all sorts of tax incentives that make it easier. But by and large, we were just paid really good fees to make really good work for people who wanted to achieve amazing things. And that, for me, feels like a very valid transaction.
Yeah, good business, client, good marginality.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we call fundamentals. It's absolutely a long time since the capital markets have worked on anything resembling fundamentals.
100%.
And I think people like you and me, sometimes we want to pull our hair out of that. And other times, my advice always is, don't rationalize it. Just ride the wave. Ride the wave. Take your 100 million. Get a buy a racehorse, whatever it is, because everybody else is doing that.
Well, that was obviously not in my stars, but or maybe it's still to come. Who knows? But
still to come.
But
still to come.
The SPAC thing. I didn't know what a SPAC was until the listing that we were involved with, and I feel as though, I don't know, how long does it take to get a Harvard MBA? A couple of years. I feel like I've been doing a 5-year MBA in the real world since starting Egoli. It's the most fascinating process, and one of the most liberating moments for me. And there was a confluence of things and forgive me for straying into the personal, but, this podcast is called The Confessional.
No, absolutely.
There was a confluence of sort of personal circumstances in 2024, which was my annus horribilis. I had some ill health, which is something that really shocked me because I've never had a day ill in my life. My mother was very, very ill and subsequently died during 24. I had shareholders screaming at me because we were at that point where they all felt they should be getting their money out. And in fact, we have a big cap table, or Egoli has a big cap table, and we have 3 or 4 shareholders who are much more vocal than the remaining larger group. But I think that always happens. So I really was, I was exhausted. I sort of reached a point at Christmas of 24 where I took a breath and thought, you know what, I'm not chasing money anymore. I don't know how to raise money. I'm not doing this very well. I'm clearly bad at raising money. I'm bad at convincing people that this is a good business, which it is. So I'm just going to stop doing that, which is not my sweet spot, and I'm going to focus on the business. So 25, basically we doubled turnover, and we went into profit. So last year was our first year in profit, having carried losses for the first few.
Massive milestone.
Which is huge, absolutely huge. But more than that, the product market fit piece with the Egoli kind of business, which is a marketplace, is so much about user acquisition. And we started 2025 with 161 users, and we finished 2025 with 1,898 users with 0 marketing. So all organic growth. And, you come out to the end of a year like that, and I smug is definitely not the word, but relieved that actually my conviction in this business somehow has been validated in that growth during 25. And now we have a proper story to tell that will accelerate the growth of the business. And that feels really good. To your point, going back to fundamentals, doing the stuff that actually you can control. You can't control the financial markets.
No, but you control good costs. You know what you can sell for. You know you've got a marginality, and that's a business model. You know what your overheads are. You use AI a little bit. We'll come on to that in a minute to maybe get them down a little bit. You're making profit. You're throwing off some cash. That's it. Then the rest of it is almost outside your control, and the capital markets will do. But I remember, that story you told briefly there. You were in Como in 24. You've been in Como every year, the summit. And that 24 one was quite an emotional one because you were very honest about what was going on, as you've alluded to there, as was Bohan, if you remember. And it was the kind of like first summit after the VC go, scale moment had passed, and everybody was starting to pick up the pieces. And, you were one of those people that explained all of that. I want to ask you now that you've got through that, because we can now that you've got through it a little bit. Explain a little bit to everybody that's listening, what is Egoli in as if you were explaining it to a 5-year-old. There is an element of archive being important now. People say that, but they don't really know what it means in the grand scheme of sports content. And then how you kind of like commercialize that, or how people can find it. And you've created this kind of marketplace. Without going into a huge amount of detail, explain why that's all of a sudden clearly working very, very well.
I think, well, first of all, the principle is incredibly simple. There are people who create content and there are people who buy content. And they buy it for all sorts of purposes, making documentary films, using it in their influencer coaching things that they do on Instagram, or making TV commercials, or whatever those use cases are. And then there are all these people who are making content but don't really have a marketplace to sell it. So unless you are in the ecosystem of Getty, where Getty essentially controls the creation of the content, there isn't much. And I mean, there's Adobe stock, and there are the various stock archives, but it's very, very controlled by the operator. What Egoli is all about is, and people overuse this word so much, and I feel embarrassed even using it, but we've democratized access to that trade environment for digital content. So it's photography and video. I think we are at a point, and by the way, I actually think that Egoli was too early. I think
you were for sure.
Way too early. I mean, I was so immersed in the world of user-generated content and archive and how you tell stories by bringing those things together. It didn't occur to me that nobody else had got there yet. That sounds terribly arrogant. I don't mean it like that. There were filmmakers who were there.
Welcome to my world. Sorry, that's even more arrogant. Welcome to my world.
It's not intended.
But let me ask you, because you said something that I don't want people to be... Is it user-generated content, or is it rights holder archive IP, or is it both?
All of the above. So anybody that creates content can put it into the marketplace, and whoever wants to buy it can buy it. And then there are various, if you like, sets of ropes that we put people behind. So, for instance, International Paralympic Committee is probably still our biggest enterprise or corporate subscriber. They have chosen not to put a single clip, not a single moment in time on a public marketplace, but they have invited, I think it's coming up for about 170 users to be able to access that content. And that includes sponsors, federations, governing bodies, athletes, the people who are in that ecosystem. And they have been making really, really good money just by facilitating the transaction with, or by us facilitating the transaction between the sponsor wanting to use a clip of a Paralympic athlete in a promotional video or whatever. And they charge a nominal fee. It means that the user can access that content instantly. Their transaction is online. We're talking about possibly not micropayments in their cases, but a few dollars or a few tens of dollars. And it means that the relationship between them as creators of content and the users is frictionless. It means that people can go into the archive, search for what they want. The AI has tagged it and identified it and given it a...
Your AI.
Our AI.
I'm going to stop you here again because I've got a knockout question, I think. But before I ask the knockout question, a good question, I mean knockout, not a difficult one. A long hop to be dispatched to the boundary. But I'm asking this, your business model is when that match happens on your marketplace, you take a little piece of that, I guess, yeah?
So it's a two-sided marketplace. So we take subscription fees on the one hand. So as somebody who is a creator, there's a free tier. I mean, it's a very classic model. So there's a free tier, then there's a sort of $9.99 a month tier, and then it goes up to $69.99, $269, $7 something, and $1,100, and then after that you become an enterprise or corporate or large customer, however you want to call yourself. We don't sell seats. There's no SaaS model behind it. It's a very straightforward. You pay to store and make your content available, and other people pay to buy it. And we take a clip on the sale or that transaction, and we take a subscription fee for people for whom we're storing the content.
Here's the long hop. Here's the long hop route. Now, you're saying sponsors can go on there and search, and as you know, most sponsors have got a media agency. That's always been the model, and for many, many, many years. It's no longer the model, Caroline. There's something called these AI bots that, I personally, who's nobody, not a brand, not a media agency, I can say, put together a 3-minute clip using Paralympic footage and a couple of things from somewhere else and do it for me. Is Egoli, or whatever it's called technically, with APIs, can that be interrogated by these AI bots now to come up with something like that?
So that's an interesting question. So on the public site, 100%. So when a rights holder or a creator decides that their content is going to be publicly available, and at the moment that's the smaller part of our business, there's about 200,000 clips available publicly against 7.5 million privately and by invitation. The public side is what we're growing. But you could send a bot into that public site and say, go and find these clips and make this. but International Paralympic Committee, for instance, don't want their content in that space, partly because of the threat of that sort of thing happening.
Okay. Interesting.
So you can build in the levels of access. And I mean, we also, last year we started to see a huge demand by the AI companies who are building large language models. And they are licensing content from the Egoli platform for use in building large language models.
Wow.
So we've had quite a lot of people come on board and make their content public so that these tech companies can come and find the content and license it in order to build the models. And there's a very, very clear split between those who are very suspicious and don't want to do it and those who have kind of gone, going to shrug my shoulders, it's going to happen anyway, we may as well make some money from it. So there are definitely the two camps.
Well, you mentioned this here AI. Well, I did, but you took it on. You're, as I said at the top of the show, you're one of the people most celebrated as a storyteller in a world before AI. How do you look at now everything that's out there? Oh, look what you can do. You can create a 200 million budget action movie for the cost of nothing with AI, and you can see the clips all over social media. What's that going to do for the creative industries, Caroline? You're the best placed person to have a view on this.
I'm not sure it's necessarily a detractor from the finished product. I think what AI is already doing is shaking up the employability of people not only in the creative industries, but across every industry. So, I mean, a very simple example, we made dozens of films for countries and cities bidding to host Olympic Games and World Cup soccer and all those sorts of things. I cannot think of a film where we didn't have to, as part of the brief, create an artificial stadium filled with artificial people to show what the stadium in 7 years' time was going to look like when the said Olympic Games or FIFA World Cup was going to be staged there. Now, at that time, that was a CGI project that, cost the bidding cities hundreds of thousands of dollars and weeks of work to create. Now, that part of the equation, which is not, it's fundamental to the storytelling, but the distribution of budget to that element of it versus other pieces was disproportionate, really. Now that proportion has shifted. So the time taken to create that equivalent of the CGI stadium and the cost of achieving that vision of the future, which, by the way, looked completely real. And I actually was looking at one of our films the other day and I had to stop myself and think, is that real or did we create that? And we had created it in CGI. So nothing's changed on that front. It's just that the whole process has become much more efficient, much less expensive, and sadly is now dependent on considerably fewer people. So really your very, very top creatives and visionaries are not at any risk. I think to some extent their status becomes elevated because they are the people who are defining how this is going to play out. It's the people who are pressing the buttons and doing the job who I don't know. I don't quite know how the career path for someone like that will play out going forward. And that's the tragedy of this, is I think there's a huge swathe of people who are negatively affected, but then also a portion of the population and the working population who benefit.
Yeah, and it's the great phrase of our time, certainly in my book, polarization. It's just, that's the world we live in now, whether it's wealth distribution or the way sport is categorized into what we all know that story. And AI is just going to do that.
My view of AI is that this is our industrial revolution. And if you think about what happened during the Industrial Revolution, the people that built the factories and did very well out of it are the people who went on to own football clubs and start the whole professional sports industry. And the people who didn't do so well were the people who previously had built things and made things. So I think we're in a similar sort of space.
Yep. Maybe you've answered this with our Russian friends before, or with Russian money. Who is the person you wish you had never met? Have you covered that already? Or is there somebody else? Give me some gossip. Come on. No, you love gossip.
Yeah,
You're behaving well today. Come on.
I don't want to end up in Siberia. I quite like West London. I think I'm not going to name names. It doesn't do anybody any good.
Of course not. But type of profile.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the kind of very aggressive, very masculine, the toxic masculine kind of VC person. That's really the category of person that I now do make very sure I try to steer clear of. There are several people I wish I'd never met because they've just, I don't know, it's extraordinary how an individual can challenge one's sense of self and worth. And I've become much less tolerant of just sort of accepting that there are people like that and you have to suck it up. Now I'm very happy to turn my back and walk away and try not to feel that I've missed an opportunity because I somehow didn't fulfill what they needed or wanted. So I think we've kind of covered it.
This is an interesting little side debate or link to what you've just said there. We know we've gone through for how many years? 10, 15, 20, 30? An idea that men and toxic masculinity has been reined back in by all kinds of, whether it's genuine appreciation of the real role of women and the real abilities of women and what they can achieve, or whether it's fake. I would be in the category of probably being seen as more traditional than modern, but I tend to think I'm slightly more honest on the reality of it. These people that you're meeting, the ones that you didn't like, the ones that treated you badly, did you get any idea that in their public lives, they were even trying to consider themselves modern and, understanding, and would be the ones that were talking about the need to be more inclusive and everything? What I'm saying is, were they the worst hypocrites?
Yes, is the short answer.
Right.
Yes.
Right, that's sad. That is sad.
It really is, isn't it? But I mean, it has ever been thus. It's just how people are. But I do think it's also important. I don't want to, and I don't believe this at all. I don't want to come across as a women are better than men kind of advocate.
God, no. You're not like that.
There's toxic femininity as well. And I think one's got to accept that there are just toxic people. Fortunately, I think they're in the minority, but it's just very disappointing and frustrating when you encounter them. Let
me come on to something which, I made a post recently, last couple of days, which is something I believe, you're so synonymous with the Olympics, Caroline. And these Olympics here in my country that I reside now in Italy, I think undoubtedly have been the Olympics of women. Obviously Italian women, but more in general, it's been an undoubted success about the glory of what women can achieve. And I was just pondering that these last couple of days. I've always had this view, and I've said it to you privately and I've said it publicly. I do believe women in many ways are the superior machine. They've got a wider emotional bandwidth. They take on more things because of the way society has always told them they have to behave. But when you see them also do incredible things in sport consistently, my conclusion is that the theme women's sport has got an inevitability about its success. It has to have. It is utterly compelling. The backstories are so interesting. They're men, on the other hand, normally, we're talking about, what men at the end of the day have got 3 or 4 buttons. There's not that many more. There really aren't, Caroline, there aren't. But a woman, there's 40. Then you still only got the morning, then an afternoon there's another 40. So what I'm saying is, we talked about backstories, we talked about creating, the everything that you've done in your career. I'm looking at these Olympics now, and I'm celebrating them as a man who's watching them with real passion. And I'm asking myself, why am I not watching women's soccer with real passion? Why am I not watching women's golf, which I think is great, with real passion? What is it about these Olympics and these stories and these moments that have just dragged me in to just knock away any idea that, oh, men's sport is great and women's sport is kind of like, what's happened? What's the secret here?
I can speak to this from a personal point of view, but it's very, very much a personal point of view. First of all, I do think the Olympics is different to any other sporting event. It's the, so if we just take gender out of it for a second, it's the one occasion where you find yourself going to watch weightlifting or curling or, you know, the sports that you would never, ever have expected that you'd go and see. So I went to see the biathlon last weekend at the Milan Cortina Games. And I mean, I've never seen a biathlon event in my life. Interestingly, it was the biathlon team event. It's the first time they've had a mixed team event. So the two men go off first and then the two women go off second, so that a female athlete is crossing the finish line. It was an unbelievably exciting race. I have to say I was incredibly privileged to have probably the best seat in the house. I was right there when the athletes were coming towards their shooting positions and skiing off into the finish. It was a phenomenal event. But it's not something I have or I bring any preconception to. And I think, and I have to reiterate, this is completely a personal point of view. Olympic sports are such that we are discovering the sport as well as the athletes at the same time for most of us, unless we're particularly
like biathlon.
interested.
Yep,
exactly.
Yeah.
And even things like, you know, downhill skiing, which I'm a very, very keen skier, but you watch downhill skiing and it is somehow entirely, well, it is completely different. I mean, quite what those people, they've got a piece of DNA missing, I think, to be able to do that. And the big air competition last night, I mean, anybody that's prepared to ski down the equivalent of a ski jump and then do acrobatics before they land, I mean, they must be on some undetectable drug. I can't imagine any human being would do that without, I don't know, some sort of fuel. But that for me is what makes the Olympic stories so utterly compelling, is we're learning. For me, the challenge with now, and we've also had this conversation about participation and spectating. I think spectators for women's sports and participation in women's sports are actually two very, very distinct conversations. And I love that participation in women's sport is growing. I love that there are more girls coming into football or soccer and into golf. I love that there is this sort of relentless growth of girls becoming female athletes or women, you know, growing up as women in sport. But from a spectating point of view, you think about the amount of money that's been invested in creating the entertainment property around golf and soccer and rugby, and, you know, rugby maybe even less so, because women's rugby, I think, is growing as a spectator sport. But there is such a preconception for an audience when they go into those events. When it's not met, it's a disappointment. And that, I think, is the differentiator. I think it will probably change with future generations when we've all become much more used to seeing women in the sports that have been, you know, sort of in the male preserve for so long. I mean, I sat on the board of the ECB and was part of creating the 100. And that for me is really interesting. So we're into the 5th or 6th year, I guess now, of the 100, maybe 5th year. And the women's 100 is as popular as the men's. And I think it's because the format, right from the very beginning, was something that was presented as the same thing, regardless of who was competing. And the experience is the same. The entertainment wrapping is the same. And therefore it is accepted as the same thing. But I think with soccer and golf, there is so much history. And and to some extent tennis as well, there's so much history that has come from the men's game that it's hard for our generation, and perhaps even one or two after ours, to immerse themselves in the shift.
That's still not scratching the itch that I've got, which, I mean, I can only look at it from my point of view. You know, when I see women go to see women's soccer, what you've just said there is absolutely the case. You know, I just don't see a product that in any way competes with what I'm used to, and I switch off. Here, I'm not switching off. And my question to you is this, Caroline. The ultimate success of women's sport, how much do you think it depends on converting males to be fans of women's sport? Conversely, can they do it with just female fandom?
I'll start with the second one first. I don't think so. I don't think female fandom equals an audience.
Neither do I.
The truth is that we want to share experiences with others, and we don't just want to share experiences with people who are exactly like us, which comes back to the Olympic thing. You're all learning. You know, you stand next to somebody at the biathlon and you're having to teach one another about the sport you're seeing. So it's a completely shared experience that I don't think works if it's just a stadium full of women watching women play a sport.
I don't think it works. But then you say, Caroline, okay, a lot of people won't agree with that, but I tend to think that's the case. Then you say two things. One, coming back to the point that the women's got 40 buttons and the guys got 4, has the more complex machine, the woman, going to be able to dedicate enough of her mind space to fandom, which is much easier for a guy because, you know, the guy's 4 buttons are, you know, sport, beer, guns, and the last one you know about. That's it. That's it.
Gosh, I will never look at a man the same again.
No, but you know that's the case. We are not sophisticated machines. But so what I'm saying is the woman is, if the guy isn't going to be dragged over to follow women's sport, is there going to be enough women that are going to be narrow enough in their fandom to generate a real business? And that's my thing. I'm not sure there is. But, and if there is, it'll take time. It'll take a lot of time.
I think that would be my response is, I think there is, but not now. I think little boys growing up now are probably being exposed to women's sport almost to the same extent they are to men's sport. So it will be really interesting to see how this sort of generation of kindergartners, if you like, consumes their sport in the future. I think we're just not at a point where the fan base is, or the current commercially viable fan base is ready to accept, I don't want to use the word deficiencies because I don't think they are deficiencies, but the differences between women's soccer, women's golf, women's tennis, and the men's versions of the game. I mean, it's interesting. Tennis, I think, is probably the furthest along that timeline in the main sports.
I think they're getting there even more now. Yeah. So it's interesting because people are going to have to solve this. Investors are putting money into women's sport. These are the questions they need to ask. I believe in Caroline, if they just do it on, oh, we have to do this because it's fair. Oh, it's inevitable because it's inevitable. I think everybody's going to lose a lot of money. But I'll come back to what I said earlier. Watching these Olympics, my idea of the inevitability of women's sport is much stronger than it's ever been. But it's not a slam dunk. It needs smart people, I think, to work on it.
I mean, you think about the stories of these games and really, I mean, I was in a fan park just before the biathlon watching the downhill where Lindsey Vonn had her absolutely catastrophic fall. And that to me has been very, very interesting. There's been so much criticism of her for getting back on the mountain, having had an injury 2 weeks previously, and she's been described as reckless and irresponsible and all of those things.
Yeah.
Now, I am certain...
I don't agree with that.
No, well, I don't either. It's her choice. She had medical advice that will have told her what the risks were. So she made an informed decision.
You only live once.
Absolutely. And if that's what drives her, then do it. You cannot take it. For me, I mean, I can't say I really wanted her to win the gold medal or anything, but to see her go out that way was just heartbreaking. That is not how you want to end that journey. But if that had been a man, nobody would have had that criticism. And yet she has been the story of the games. Well, apart from the cheating curlers. But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to me.
It is interesting. It's exactly what I was saying earlier. There is a higher bar. There's a higher standard of social behaviour, it seems, that goes towards women and towards men. We get a kind of like, it's okay to be reckless and a little bit crazy card that we're allowed to play.
Yeah.
Women aren't. And whilst Lindsay Vonn is the story is the one you told, Brignani, the one who a year ago shouldn't have been walking, she wins 2 golds.
Absolutely.
So all the stories are female. Before I leave the Olympics and we finish off the confessional, you're a storyteller. If I was Casey Wasserman, which is super interesting, he's the chairman of the LA Olympics, who's having to sell his agency because he's in the Epstein files. Let's say I was the replacement of Casey Wasserman tomorrow, me, and I'm saying, Caroline, you need to help me here because we've got the Olympics where the president is this guy, and I'm not saying whether the president's right or wrong, doesn't matter. He's controversial, he's polarizing. How do you tell stories about the LA Olympics and not have them be what that could be a really bad outcome of protests and everything like that? How would you approach that whole thing, Caroline?
The default position, and I don't have all the facts, and it's very complicated, and there are a million pieces of information that one would need to include in any kind of proper recommendation. But honestly, the default for me is always to go to the athlete stories. Athlete stories are fundamentally non-controversial. They are about people who are, who are doing everything they possibly can to raise the bar. They are people who have defied, we've just been talking about, defied so much adversity, who have overcome things that mere mortals can't even begin to think about. They are the women who are winning Olympic golds and going home and feeding their children. They're human stories that it doesn't really matter where they play out. They are the fundamental essence of what the Olympic Games is all about. And if one continues to elevate the athlete, which is what Pierre de Coubertin invented the Games to do, then I think one's in a safe space. And yes, there will be a lot of noise around the periphery. There will, who knows how it's going to play out. I wouldn't want to predict. But if you are true to the story of the athlete and those incredible human moments, then I think you could control the narrative as far as is possible. Good to hear that. Optimistic. 4th question: what trend do you think you missed or were late for in life? So many. This is a really difficult one. I'm always late for trends. I'm always way behind. In business, I've always been ahead of them, and in my personal life, way behind them. Like what? Like what in your personal life? What trend were you behind? Then you see that this is called the confessional, but then we get to a point where I'm not even sure it's a trend necessarily, but I was very much, I have throughout my adult life, I think I've behaved very much like the sort of the 80s career girl who's focused on everything she can do in her working life and not paid enough attention to her private life. We've all seen those movies. I mean, I am that character. I think that's probably been the biggest one, is that, the trend towards women becoming career girls, that died off in probably the early 90s, but I was still going until until now. So that's a trend that I wish I'd got on earlier. But, there's so many things. But no, I think that's the main thing. The biggest thing for me is actually in business, with both businesses. And New Moon was a real struggle in the early days. We were really ahead of the curve there as well. And it really was the London Olympics that defined that business. And we invented something. It's the trouble with invention. You always, if you're inventing something, you're always ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and the first person through the wall gets a bloody nose, always. Right, the fifth question, what sliding door were you just in time for? We've probably covered a lot of that because your story is full of success. But what specific sliding door were you just in time for?
It comes back to exactly the same thing. Both the start of New Moon and Egoli were complete happenstance. So, without wanting to go on for too long, New Moon, it was in the days of a thing called the White Book, which was a directory of all of the advertising agencies and people commissioning film and video and creative services. And I basically, when I started the business, started making phone calls from the White Book. I got through to a company called the Added Value Company and said, could I please speak to the head of production? And was put through to this guy whose response to me was, oh, thanks so much for returning my call. And I thought, okay, I'll play along with this. And that resulted in doing work for Walker Snack Foods and Shell. And that was the beginning of New Moon. That was a complete, I could have got to P or Q or R or S or Z in the White Book before I got a brief, but it happened while I was on A. And then with Egoli, I had this thing in my head that, it was, I'd sold New Moon and I'd sold the archive of New Moon and was really frustrated at how one couldn't liberate value from these, this massive content. But I have no credentials at all in technology. I have no idea. I still don't have any idea about technology. I can talk a good game. And I do understand the fundamentals, but I can't make my iPhone work. And I was at that time, I was living in LA and I was going through a stage of... in
the apartment that you flooded, let's not forget that. You were living in LA, in Malibu, in the apartment that you flooded, and then you came up with a story. You came up with a story to get out of it. I came back and I don't know what happened. There was the seal of the window. It must have been rain. It never rains in California.
Oh, it does. Oh, God, yeah, it does. They said,
well, in California.
Yeah. So I'm in California and I'm on Bumble. So going through a phase in my life where I was out there dating.
Oh, and what's Bumble? That's like Tinder type thing.
Bumble is a Tinder style thing.
Okay, right,
yeah,
right.
So
right,
a dating
right.
app. And I'd matched with this chap called Patrick. And I got to the point where I was so bored with the whole thing. I thought, I'm just not doing this anymore. And I thought, this is it. This is the last date. So I walk into this pizza place and he's sitting at the bar and I can see the back of his shoulder. He vaguely resembles the man in his pictures, although he's considerably larger and older than his pictures. And at that moment, I thought, do I walk around and go home and say, I'm so sorry, I got stuck in traffic? And I thought, no, just go and do it. Go and have a drink with him. And it turns out there was no romantic interest on either side, but it turns out that he basically was a consultant who was looking at AI and technologies for the management of archives for American universities. And through him, and through that date, I was introduced to the people who basically we built the prototype with and started the Egoli journey. So if I had turned around and walked out of that bar and not gone in, who knows? I may never have.
Where is Patrick now? Is he a shareholder in the business or he just gave you free advice?
Do you know
and then you ditched him as soon as you'd sucked all the information out?
No. I give him so much credit. He was, right at the very beginning, he said, we had this conversation, he made this introduction and gave me all sorts of insights and input, and we had a whiteboard session together. And at the end of this whiteboard session, he said to me, look, if you want me to sign something or whatever to say that I have no claim on this business, I'm really happy to do it. It's just so exciting to see what you're doing. And basically...
he was lying, Caroline. You say there was no romantic interest. He was giving you all of that Don't be so naive. A guy is not going to spend time doing... No chance.
Oh, Roger, I like to believe that there are people in this world who just do things because they feel like the right thing.
I told you there's only 4 buttons. We do one through them again. Sport, beer, guns, and that one. That's... Spending time on the whiteboard just for the hell of it is not one of the buttons.
I'm going to give him all the credit. I think he was just being a really good guy.
That is a great story, Bumble. Right, so here's the last one. This has been absolutely fantastic, this confessional. And this is the most poignant one. And you're a storyteller, so I've got a lot of expectation here. What person do you owe most to in life, but you didn't tell them enough?
My dad. And I know it's such a cliche.
But it's a good answer. Tell me about your dad.
My dad was... he was a UK decathlete. He was in the RAF, and he was an accountant. And when I was 6 years old, my parents moved from the UK to South Africa, and I obviously was taken with them and grew up in South Africa. And throughout my life, I was, when was that? That was the mid-70s. And throughout my life in South Africa, my dad was the person who was always supportive, always demanding, always made it very clear what was right and what was wrong. And he was somebody who really lived by a very, very strong moral code. But I was a swimmer, and he encouraged me to swim. He encouraged me to ride horses. He encouraged me to do everything. But I will never, ever forget, as a young swimmer, was coming back at the end of probably my second or third season and was starting to swim in the pool at home. And he would walk along the side of the pool, and his footsteps would be just ahead of my head in the water, so that I was constantly being pushed to keep up with his footsteps on the side of the pool. And that, for me, it's an absolute symbol of what my dad did for me. He basically laid out a path to ambition, a path to achieving aspiration. I never thanked him.
You never thanked him.
Not overtly. No, he
knew, Caroline.
I hope he knew. I really hope he knew.
Well,
he died
would
in
have seen,
2007.
Okay. All right, so he saw a lot of your stuff. Maybe not all the London stuff and all that, but he saw enough to recognise. I would have thought, as a father now, I would have thought, what she's doing now, she was paying attention. I'm sure he thought that.
Yeah, he knew that. He knew that. So yeah, that's great. I wish I had articulated it. I wish I'd said it loudly and said, "Thank you, Dad. I love what you did for me."
That's lovely, Caroline. Listen, that's a great place to end. This is everything that I knew it would be. I was waiting a long time for you to come on, as you know. And this has been a wonderful confessional. And thank you very, very much for your time, Caroline.
Thank you, Roger. Care. Thank you for going relatively easy on me.
This is me. This is maybe other times I act another persona. This one is me, as you know. This is what it is. Thank you very much, Caroline.
Thanks.
Take care.
And you. Thanks, Roger.